Okay, so if we look at our page, we have all the content there, but the styling is not there. So let's just start writing some CSS. To start off, first of all, I'm going to link my CSS sheet. Otherwise, you're going to write a bunch of CSS and nothing's going to happen, and you're going to be wondering why, because we don't actually have our style sheet linked in our HTML. So right above the title, you can really put this anywhere, but I'm just going to say link CSS. And the href, you want to be the name of your CSS file. So there we go. We have our CSS file linked. Now we can start writing some default styling. I'm going to have the before, the universal before, after, and then the universal to set the box sizing of every element to border box. I want the padding of everything to be 0 and the margin of everything to be 0. That way when we're adding padding and margin later on, everything is consistent. We covered these a little bit before, so I'm not going to go into them too much. We're going to start off with the body. So the first thing we want to do is add this background image. You should have an image of your own. I didn't supply this image, but all I did was go to pexels.com and found a travel image. I just searched for travel and then added it to the folder, the image folder I have here. You don't necessarily need to have it in a folder, but it does keep things organized. So in my case, I do have it in a folder. So if you type BI, enter, it'll give you your whole line of code there. And I'm going to add the quotes, and then I'm going to go into my image folder, and I'm going to put the background. So now for viewing the page, this is what we have. It looks nice. Yeah, it looks good. I'm going to add a few other background properties that aren't going to do anything at this point, but they will help for when we are adding responsiveness. So background size, I'm going to add the cover, and I'm going to add the background repeat to no repeat, just to get those out of the way. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is I want to set the height of the body to 100 vertical height. So the actual height of the screen. And a lot of times you might not want to do this if you have content that's going past, like if you have a lot of content, you're not going to want to do that, because then the body's only going to be the size of the screen and you actually want it more, so you don't have to set a height. But in this case, we only have, we're only having a landing page, so we're just going to set the height to be 100 vertical height. And then from there we can flex the body. The reason for that is that'll give us our spacing. So let me show you what I'm talking about. If we just say df for display flex, you'll notice it flexed all the elements, put them in a row, because the flex direction by default is row. We're going to change the flex direction to column, and that'll put things back to the way they were. And then I'm going to add justify content space between. So you'll notice that now our header section's at the very top, our content's at the very center, and then our copyright's at the very bottom. It gave us even space in between all the elements, which looks good. Normally, again, justify content would be the horizontal positioning, but because we changed the direction of the flex to column, justify content now handles the vertical spacing. So to handle our, actually we'll just leave it there. We'll cover the rest in a little bit. The other thing I wanted to do is add a Google font. I don't like this font. I might as well get our Google font going right now. So if I go to a browser, I go to Google Fonts. You can just Google Fonts. I'm gonna use Roboto. So all you have to do is click it, and it will select this font family for you. You'll see it down here. If you click this, it'll bring up this tab. We're gonna go to customize. We're gonna check thin 100, regular 400, and black 900. So that way we can have some diversification of our font weights, which we're gonna use at a later time. To bring this into your documents, pretty simple. You just copy this link here, go into the code, and then put this above your CSS sheet. In this case, it doesn't matter, but you do want to get in the habit of leaving your CSS sheet or your script file at the bottom, and then plug in any CSS sheet or script file above your CSS, because you want your CSS or script to overwrite whatever you're importing, just so that way what you're typing is able to use what you've imported and overwrite anything that needs to be overwritten. just get in the habit of leaving your style sheet at the bottom. So we have our font length, so that's good. Now in the CSS, let's actually apply that. So font family, Roboto, and then an alternative if they don't have that, we'll just do a regular sans serif font. So now if we go back to our document, you'll see that our font has changed. Looks good. And then I do want to change the color as well from black to E7FFFB. It's like a light blue color. And it looks kind of weird now because the background's very bright. But just bear with me, we will fix that in a little bit. So the next thing I want to do is fix this header. Here's the logo and here's the UL, the nav. We want these to be spaced side by side. So the easiest way to do that would just be coming into the header and display flex. That automatically positions them side by side. Now you'll notice that the nav is still positioned horizontal and it has these little dots. We also want the nav to be positioned horizontal as well. So because of that, I will actually set the header UL to be display flex as well, and that will space them out horizontally. Now you'll see that we have an issue that they're all on the left side and they're stuck together. So back up in the header, let's say because flex directions row, if we say justify content, that will space things horizontally. So we want to do space around, and you'll see that that gave us, if I would have done space between, these would have been at the edges in order to give us even like space in between. I did space around, so it gives you space on the outsides as well as the inside. And that looks good for me. I like a little bit of space on each side, and then, you know, the even spacing in the center. The next thing I'm going to do is increase this font size of the logo, because if you look at the HTML, that is a class of logo div. So under the UL, actually we'll do it above the UL, seeing as we have the header, logo, and then the UL. We'll keep things just kind of uniform and organized. We'll just go and target the logo. And I'm going to set the font size to 2M. So twice the size it was. And that looks good. The next thing you're going to notice though is that now our nav elements is like way higher. It's not really centered with our logo. It's like above it almost. So the way you fix that is align items property. So on our header, we have our justify content that spaced everything around horizontally. Vertically though, we can go align items and say center, and that will give us even spacing. Now you notice the nav moved down a little bit. If I go back, see it's at the top, and then we add this and it moved it down, so they're actually centered. So that looks good. The next thing we're gonna do is space these out and get rid of the little dots. So the dots come on the UL. It's a list style type. We're just gonna say none. We don't want any dots at all. And then we want to go into the LI, each individual LI element, and give it the spacing. So we'll target the header UL LI. And the first thing I want to do is add some padding. We'll do 20 pixels on the top and bottom, and then 40 pixels on the left and right. And you'll see that spaced them out. Nice. I'm going to add a cursor pointer. I'm going to do that right now so I can show you something that if I hover over, you'll see it changes to a pointer. But there's no, it's just like one solid pointer. There's no spot where there's no, like right here, I don't want a pointer. You know, I want some spacing in between each of these buttons. So that'll be the margin. Padding does the inside spacing. Margin does the outside spacing. We'll do 0 on the top and bottom, and then 20 pixels on the left and right. So now you'll see it added some more spacing. But now you'll see when I get right about here, there's some spot where there's no cursor pointer, which I really like. So that looks good for our nav. The only thing I'm gonna cover it now is the background is super bright. So with the background image property here, you're actually able to add another property. So we actually want the URL to come second, the image, and then first we're gonna add a linear gradient. So linear gradient, add your parentheses, comma, and then have the URL. So linear gradient and then the URL. And in the linear gradient, it takes two colors. We're gonna start off with RGBA, and then I'm gonna just add the other RGBA now, so because things get a little confusing with parentheses. So another RGBA. So you should have linear gradient, open, close, and then your RGBA 1 and RGBA 2. So I'm just gonna show you how this works. If I add, like, it's taking a color. If I add red, let's say, yeah, it's 25500. We have red. Let me get rid of this A really fast. The A adds an alpha, and I don't want to add an alpha channel yet, so I'll just do RGB. This is just to show you. You don't have to code along. I'm gonna make it red and then white. So we'll say 255, 255, 255. So it's going from red to white, and then it has the URL. So if you look at what happens, we have a gradient, an actual linear gradient from top to bottom, which you can change from. There's different properties to right, bottom, left. You can add in different directions. We're gonna keep it simple. And yeah, this is kind of what we're going for. Although we don't want it to be solid, so that's why we had the alpha RGBA. And then I don't want red as well. I'm just gonna add this alpha back in. Get rid of the red and white, and we want black. So we're gonna go 0, 0, 0, comma 0.95 for opacity. So almost 100%, but not all the way there. And then we also want black on this side as well, but about 0.5, so a little bit lighter opacity. Now if we view that, you'll see that we have pretty dark black up top, and then it fades into a lighter dark at the bottom. But now you can really see our font, so it looks a lot better. So that's good right there. Next, let's target the content section, and we actually want to position this in the center. So the easiest way to do that is just target the content and TAC, text align center, and that will position our elements centered. All right. Next, let's add some styling to these individual elements. We want this to be maybe a little smaller. We want the header to be bigger, and we definitely want to fix this button. So content H1 for the header. We'll just set the font size to like 4.5 M. Makes it way bigger. I like that. Which actually makes this font size pretty good. The only thing I do want to add here is some spacing. Actually, the spacing's not bad. We'll just add some margin top to the button to move it down a little bit. So the next thing we're really gonna want to target is the content button. The first thing I'm gonna do is margin top 20 pixels, so it'll give it some space here. I could maybe do more than that, 30 pixels. I like that. And then I'm gonna add some spacing on the inside. So padding, I'll do, scroll down here, padding, we'll do like 10 pixels top and bottom, and 40 pixels on the left and right. That's pretty good. I don't mind that. But I only want an outline here. I don't want a background color. So I target background color. You can say transparent. That gets rid of the background. This border I don't like. I'm gonna add my own border. Let's add 2 pixels, solid, and I want to use the same color I was using earlier. I'll just copy and paste that in there. Cool. And then the last thing I want to change on the button is the color from black to the same color. So there's our button. That looks pretty good. I am gonna add a little border radius on these edges to make it a little round, nothing too noticeable. Maybe like 3 pixels, so you can see there's a little rounding there. That looks good to me. Another thing is I'm noticing I want the cursor pointer back over the button, so let's do the cursor pointer. There you go. And that looks pretty good. So let's work on the copyright. All we have to do to that is just center the footer like we did with the content. So if we go footer, TAC, enter, text align center, it will center it. And I want to give it some spacing from the bottom. So we can say margin bottom, I don't know, 50 pixels. It's not bad, actually. I'm happy with that. Okay, so here's our basic layout. It looks pretty good. And honestly, that's the end of the CSS section. The next section will cover the media queries to make it responsive and all the hover animations. So I will see you guys in the next section.